You're listening to the Niners Bros, your home for post-game analysis, correcting media narratives, and keeping you up to date on all things San Francisco 49ers. What's up, guys? I'm Michael Ditchfield.
And I'm David Ditchfield, and we are the Niners Bros. On this week's episode, we recap the 49ers' victory over the Rams, putting them at 2-0 despite the schedule makers putting us on the road for the first 2 weeks of the season. So good to get off to a hot start. That was something that had been such a point of emphasis for Shanahan coming into this season.
And headed back home on a short week, the 49ers do play the Giants this week on Thursday Night Football. Always nice on a short week like that when you can stay local.
Sure thing. Well, before we break down the 49ers game, just a quick tour around the NFL. The Eagles survived the Vikings in a second straight sort of unimpressive victory after barely beating the Patriots in week one. The Broncos start the Sean Payton era 0-2 after losing to Washington. The Raiders got crushed by the Bills. The Cowboys won 30-10 over the Jets. The Jets have a problem. I know Saleh said very nice things about this is Zach's team. I think Kyle Orton could probably come off of his couch and play better than Zach Wilson.
They've got to do something. They have drafted in the last couple of years, last year specifically, as good as any team in the NFL. Just phenomenal drafts. They've got a really great defense, a bunch of offensive weapons, and once again, they are left with nobody to steer the ship.
Yeah, just horrible. Also of note, the Bengals, Vikings, and Chargers all lost to move to 0-2, which used to be the death knell for a playoff berth, but I know we were talking about this with a 17-game season. The season is extended a little bit, but still not the start that those teams were hoping for.
And the Chargers especially, boy, talk about some hard losses. I read a stat that the Chargers have scored 58 points. They have no turnovers, and they're 0-2. So apparently that's happened 32 other times in the history of the NFL, and the Chargers are the only ones that have not won either of those games. So their head coach, Staley, was in some kind of a mood after the game in his press conference, talking about how there's a lot of pride in the locker room and basically nobody is in a good mood there. They're playing really well, but again, starting 0-2 is not how you want to start.
One other notable thing was that for the second consecutive Monday Night Football, the game was kind of rocked by a really horrible injury. Of course, last week Aaron Rodgers tore his Achilles, and this week a gruesome injury for Nick Chubb, the Browns star running back that just Minka Fitzpatrick went low. Some people are saying it's dirty. It's like, well, what do you want them to do? They go high and it's a penalty. You go low and you're blowing out someone's knee. It's hard to tackle people, but yeah, just horrible to see. You know, you wish him the best and you hope that he'll be able to play next year, but just a horrible, horrible injury.
Yeah, and kind of note, the Steelers, of course, were part of that game as well. And the Steelers actually bucked a trend going back last year. I don't know if you guys remember, but teams that faced the 49ers were 0-15 in the following week after facing the 49ers. And the Steelers actually did somehow grind out a win with an unbelievable defensive and special teams performance. Their offense looked pretty terrible again, but they were able to pull out a win. And we talk about this all the time as well, how you can't say, well, this team beat that team, so that means that our team is better than this team.
Yeah.
You can't really do that, but you know, the Browns beat the Bengals, and then they lost to the Steelers, who we embarrassed in week one. So if you want to play that game, I think if you just extrapolate and look at the numbers, I believe the 49ers have assembled the greatest bunch of professional football players in the history of mankind. I'm pretty sure that's what it means.
You don't think it's a little early for that? Well, anyway, enough about the other teams who are not the greatest in the history of the NFL. Let's talk about this Week 2 matchup with the Rams. Coming into it, there were some interesting storylines we were keeping an eye on. For the Rams, they had some drama, some kind of weird things. Stetson Bennett, their rookie quarterback, 25, 26-year-old rookie, whatever he is, sort of away from the team for undisclosed reasons. It sounds like it may be, an off-the-field sort of, kind of issue. So good for the media for not finding out what that is and tattling on him. Certainly we wish him the best, but it was a bit of a distraction for them. And then Cam Akers, too, their starting running back, who's found himself in the doghouse almost like Dante Pettis did with Shanahan multiple times. He was inactive for this game and seemed to be wondering why aloud on social media. Now we know why he's been traded to the Vikings.
Yeah, and it's weird. He's a talented back, but McVay was actually asked about this week. Is this the same thing that essentially had him in the doghouse last year? And he said no, it was something else. Which I guess I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. Is it? I guess if you want to look at the positives, well, whatever that other issue was, it's not happening anymore. But now you have another guy who I don't know if he's just terrible in the locker room or off the field issues. I'm really not sure what it is because again, he is a talented player, but just has not been able to stay in good graces and get himself on the field. Just a really odd situation.
Yeah. Other things we were keeping an eye on, of course, you always want to see how the 49ers are going to handle Aaron Donald, especially without Brunskill, right? is like his kryptonite. Brunskill no longer part of the team. But we were curious to see, just how that would go and what the Rams would look like in general. They won in week 1 in surprising fashion, beating Seattle by 17 in Seattle.
Yeah, they smacked them down. It was not a close game at all.
And the 49ers, you had to wonder, too, when the streak was going to end. I mean, we had won 8 straight in the regular season against the Rams. The longer that streak goes, the more likely it is to fall. It's hard to beat any team, 10, 11, 12, 13 times in a row. But for the 49ers, other storylines we were watching, trying to see if Purdy would continue that streak of never losing a regular season game as a starter.
Another one we had mentioned was the slot position. So we had mentioned how Samuel Womack is a feisty player that we like. He's a really big special teams contributor. And after the struggles with Lenore and Oliver really struggled in the preseason as well, we were wondering if maybe Womack was going to get a chance to plug in and play there. But unfortunately, he did get injured this week and was put on the short-term IR. So he's going to miss at least 4 games. I'm hearing it could be closer to 8, so they'll kind of have to address and see after that 4-week period if they want to put him back on the, I don't know if he'll go on the PUP or the active roster or what they're going to do with him, but hopefully he'll recover quickly and get back to making contributions.
Yep. 49ers were also coming into this game hoping to keep an unusual streak alive. They had a pick 6 against the Rams 4 years in a row, which is just highly unusual, but all of that added up to a really interesting game that you really wanted to see the 49ers take. Also, the Rams Stadium is now affectionately called Levi's South. It was nice to see that sea of red. Those 49ers fans travel better, it seems, than any other team in the NFL.
I will say visually, like you mentioned, that sea of red, it's unmistakable as the camera sort of pans around the stadium. I will say the LA fans did a much better job of actually being involved and being vocal in this game than we've seen at times in the past.
There's allegations of them pumping in noise, which,
that is true.
Which have been unsubstantiated, but we'll see what happens. But as far as the game flow, this was a game that really did not sort of feel very comfortable,
no,
to say the least, in the first half. The Rams only had 3 possessions in the first half, but they put together 2 touchdowns and a field goal with an 11-play drive, an 8-play drive, and a 13-play drive. It seemed like we were just determined to play soft, and Stafford was totally content to take what we were getting.
Yeah, they kind of 49ered us with those effortless, 8 to 10 play drives where you eat up a bunch of clock, you just move the ball at will, and you end with points.
Yeah. 49ers, fortunately, were able to match them. We got the ball first and scored in 3 of our 4 possessions with 2 touchdowns and a field goal. I think the most notable thing about that is just that Shanahan finally showed some aggression, coming down right before halftime. The 49ers get down and, by the goal line, and with time left for 1 play, instead of kicking a field goal from the 1-yard line, Shanahan calls for the QB sneak and Purdy gets in, and you go into half tied at 17, which was huge, knowing that, turning right back around, you'd have to give the Rams the ball back to start the second half.
Yeah, I love that call, and even if they got stuffed, I still love that call. We have one of the best offensive teams in football, and when you're less than half a yard away from the goal line and you have a chance to tie the game there, you absolutely take it. It's the right call 100% of the time. Again, even you're not going to score every time, obviously, but that's a very high percentage play. It's the right call, and really great to see Shanahan being aggressive there.
In a little bit, we're going to give you 5 keys to victory for the 49ers and why they won this game, but I do want to highlight 2 plays from the first half that were sort of impactful or made an impression on me. The first was Drake Jackson had a touchdown saving play on a 4th and 1 sort of tackle where it was this screen and he went diving out. If he had not made that tackle on that running back, he was home free, and good to see Drake Jackson not just pursuing the quarterback, but hustling out to make a huge play.
Yeah, the numbers were absolutely there. There was like maybe one or two 49ers defenders, and they had probably 4 blockers lined up. It was the perfect play call and that close to getting in the end zone. Drake Jackson did also have one of his patented pass deflections or tipped balls at the line of scrimmage as well. So great to see him making such a huge impact. We weren't really sure. You always hear, player X has lost 10 pounds and looks amazing. Player Y has gained 10 pounds and looks amazing.
Yeah.
You always hear these stories coming out of preseason.
The best shape of their life.
Exactly. Yeah, these little canned stories that you always hear, and there's, it doesn't make any difference. But in this case, Drake Jackson actually does look better. Physically, he looks stronger, he looks faster, and he is making an impact. So that's really great to see.
Yep. It was a little scary seeing Brandon Ayuk shaken up throughout this game. It sounds like it's a shoulder thing. The clavicle's not broken, but that was a little disconcerting that he was coming in and out of the game. But I mentioned another play. I mentioned 2 plays that really stood out to me in the first half. Christian McCaffrey having a 51-yard run and then smack-talking Ahkello Witherspoon after stiff-arming him to the ground. As a Niners fan who just lived through Ahkello Witherspoon being completely unable to find the ball. It's like when the ball got close, he was always close to the receiver. It wasn't like he was getting burned all the time, but it was like he had a blindfold on when the ball came within like a 5-yard radius.
And was terrible in press coverage, just no physicality, no aggression at all. So it was really weird to even see him jawing at McCaffrey in that situation. I guess he didn't really like getting stiff-armed, but yeah, he showed way more fight verbally than he ever did physically on the field for us. And I'm not a great lip reader. It's especially difficult, when the players have the mouth guard in. But I will say I very clearly understood what McCaffrey said as he was walking away. And because this is a family-friendly podcast, I'll kind of paraphrase it for you. But he definitely called him a weak asterisk Bitcoin as he was departing. So
just nice to see Ahkello Witherspoon, just kind of disappointing a different franchise.
Yeah, it's nice, right?
So they went into halftime, tied at 17. From there, we'll talk about this, but some major adjustments were made by the 49ers, and it really showed. The Rams come out of the second half, and they have their first punt of the game. And then after that, they go interception, punt, field goal, interception, whereas the 49ers in the second half were still able to put down a field goal, a touchdown, and another field goal drive. And that was really the difference in the game, was that the 49ers were able to finally get some stops and keep scoring, even if not at a lightning pace, enough to put up 30 points in a game.
And yeah, the 49ers essentially were just not getting any pressure in the first half, and a huge part of that was, of course, the game plan. Stafford was getting the ball out very quickly, which was, of course, by design. So we're sitting there, fans on the couch, going, where are all of these Steve Wilks blitzes we've been hearing about? This would certainly be an excellent time. Didn't happen in the first half, but they basically doubled their blitz rate in the second half, and it felt like they were blitzing on pretty much every passing down there was. So that was really good to see. And once the defense did make that schematic adjustment, as you mentioned, the Rams offense really struggled. Stafford did throw 2 interceptions. One of them was not his fault at all. It bounced right off the running back's hands.
Yeah.
And on that play, Isaiah Oliver actually stepped up and made an unbelievable grab as the ball is kind of bouncing up in the air behind him. He has almost a full torso rotation and kind of plucks the ball out of the air with one hand. It made a phenomenal catch. Oliver is one of those players that we had talked about as really, again, struggling through the preseason, losing his job essentially in week 1. And then because of the Womack injury and some of these other injuries in the secondary, he was kind of thrust into action, and he really stepped up in this game.
Yeah, I would say if the first key for winning this game was the halftime adjustments from Wilks, I would say that the second was just improved performance from some of these players who had a very bad game in week 1. So Oliver, of course, with the interception, but that wasn't all he did. He had a really great tackle out near the boundary to stop the Rams from picking up a first down. He also, on a fourth down, when they tried to, the Rams were behind at that point, but still that it kind of sealed the game where Oliver shot the gap, got to the running back.
Bosa was there too, but yeah, between the two of them, they stopped him on fourth down. Just a huge momentum play.
And he wasn't the only one who stepped up. Diamador Lenora had a bit of a rough week one, and even though he graded poorly in this game because of all the off coverage, he had a fantastic interception where he ran the route for the receiver, got his head around, caught the ball. Also, Javon Kinlaw finally looked good in a game, consistently, not just one or two reps, but he was moving the pocket and getting good pressure. And then the right side of the O-line, the much maligned right side of the O-line. McKivitz gave up multiple sacks last week and Burford had 3 penalties. Well, this week they held up pretty well, and even if PFF wasn't kind to Burford in his grading, Brock Purdy was sacked once for 0 yards, essentially, as he got back to the line of scrimmage, but he had a clean pocket to throw pretty much the entire game. Great to see that improvement from the right side.
Yeah, and the 49ers have had as much success against Aaron Donald as any team has and anyone possibly could. You mentioned Brunskill earlier. For anybody who's not aware, Brunskill is kind of an average to, okay interior rotational guy. But for whatever reason, he just has Aaron Donald's number, and Aaron Donald has had no success against that guy. He's not on the team anymore, so as you mentioned, well, what's the plan now? The plan was pretty clear. It was double Aaron Donald and make somebody else beat you. And they were not able to do that. Donald was doubled, I think, something like 55% of the game.
Yep. And
really just made no impact. I mean, how often did you hear his name on the broadcast? Just hardly at all.
That's true. The 49ers, they didn't keep their streak alive of getting pick sixes, but as we mentioned from those two players, they did get 2 interceptions, and they didn't turn the ball over, and winning that turnover margin was something that Shanahan specifically mentioned in the post-game sort of locker room kind of speech, just winning the turnover margin. So that's our sort of third key, or the third thing that stood out as far as why they won. I think you have to look at Jake Moody, again, putting up another great performance as sort of like a fourth key. He made a 57-yard field goal in this game that Robbie Gould would never have been sent out for.
Nope.
So huge from him to, once again, he did have one bad kick out of bounds. That was just kind of weird. I've never seen
what happened on that? That is honestly
shank.
The worst. It was literally like a shank. That ball landed like 8 or 10 yards out of bounds. Usually it lands at least in the field of play and usually bounces out. That one never had a chance. It looked like one of those punts where you watch the down lineman and he starts running up the field and you're like, oh no, how far out of bounds did that go? It kind of felt like, when you kick it out of bounds, they start at the 40. I mean, I don't feel like it was that much on the other side of the 40. It was a really awful kick, but good to see him bounce back, and he didn't miss any of the ones that count for points.
Yep. A final key for the 49ers victory was that they, despite the Rams' efficiency in the first half, averaged almost 2 yards per play more than they did due to just really smart coaching from Shanahan to get his playmakers involved. I think he knows that the Rams tend to be a finesse team. Like Akella Weatherspoon is a perfect player for the finesse style that they like to play. And I think he just knew that this is a good team to feature Debo against, as usual. Debo's had so many great games against the Rams. He had 5 carries in this game. He had a touchdown. McCaffrey, too, was phenomenal again, just amazing. So I think that efficiency from the 49ers made a huge difference. It was nice to see Jennings get involved, too, with a couple catches.
Yeah, so some sort of team stats or unusual things. The 49ers actually lost the time of possession battle, which is exceptionally rare for them. 49ers actually had the ball for only 26 minutes to 33 for the Rams. Penalties were an issue again this week. Dre Greenlaw is a phenomenal football player, but my goodness, he just gets called for some of the dumbest penalties, those roughing penalties.
Yeah.
In this case, the Rams were already inside the red zone, so it wasn't a huge yardage penalty, but ordinarily would have been 15. The Fox broadcast did a wonderful job of talking about that for 2 minutes and somehow never actually showing the foul. So we never really got to see it. It looked like it was just kind of an after the play. He was like punching the ball out or just doing something stupid. Seemed like a really weak flag to throw there. There was also another really weird flag in this game that you don't see in the box score, but there was a weird hold called on Charvarius Mooney Ward. And then the refs said, after we've talked about it, it's not holding because Stafford was not in the pocket. And then they showed the replay. He was like dead center in the middle of the pocket. And it's like, what is going on? The only thing I could think of was that was a makeup call for that terrible Greenlaw flag, because that was one of the strangest overturned penalties. How often do you see the refs overturn their own calls like that? And then when you look at the review, it's just completely bogus. That was very strange.
Maybe they were just kind of like looking up at the at the jumbotron and like lost their focus, and they were like, "Oh shoot,
who's got this one? Somebody tell me you were watching that."
Yeah, pretty weird, but
yeah, again, penalties were a bit of an issue. Not quite as bad as last week. 6 for 57. The Rams were penalized 6 times for 55, so pretty even there. The 49ers were actually outgained offensively. The Rams had 386 total yards to 365 for the Niners, but of course the 49ers made it count. They were up ultimately by 10 right until the end of the game. We'll talk about that, kind of a weird situation as well, but Brock Purdy, definitely have to talk about Purdy. This was his worst game, I would say, as a pro, for sure. He was routinely behind receivers, behind Debo, behind Jennings, and he pretty famously had 3 really, really bad overthrows.
Yeah, the first one, you had a double move to Brandon Ayuk where he just completely cooked the corner and Purdy missed him, and then you had...
That was Witherspoon, by the way.
Yeah, and then you had... thank you for that. And then you had, I believe it was a third down to Jennings on sort of like a deeper sort of, in-breaking route where, again, just kind of an overthrow. And then the most heartbreaking of all was Debo, who almost never gets to run like a traditional go route or like a wide receiver-y type route. He's usually confined to these screens and slants and things like that. But he had Debo just wide open, and he'd already overthrown 2. And Purdy looked like he put a little, like the throw was effortful. And as soon as it left his hand, you were there with me. I said, don't overthrow it, don't overthrow it, don't overthrow it. And sure enough, it lands like 6 yards past him.
It was a really awful throw, and that one makes you sick too because there are so many different places. He was wide open, and like you mentioned, you just don't see Debo running straight past defenders. His 50, 60, 70-yard touchdowns are short passes that he takes the rest of the way. It would have been amazing to see him actually catch a ball 40, 50 yards downfield. That's just not something that he does. He's not really called on for those routes. But this throw, Purdy could have thrown a line drive and led him down the middle of the field. He could have lofted it straight down the seam. There are just so many different ways to complete that pass when the receiver is wide open, and he did the one thing you basically can't do, which was he threw a line drive and airmailed it over his back shoulder, running the wrong way. So that was really tough to see. Purdy did snap a couple of other streaks in this game. He had a 2-touchdown streak that was snapped. He also had a quarterback rating streak of 95 plus that was snapped. He finished with a 93.1 rating and had 0 touchdowns in this. There was technically like a swing pass to Debo that in reality is a pass, but because the ball went backwards, it counts as a run. So Debo actually did finish with a rushing touchdown in this one. So at the end of the day, no passing touchdowns for Purdy, 206 yards. But most importantly, no turnovers in the worst game of his career.
Yeah,
So.
I think the bad news is that the 49ers still don't have a quarterback who consistently hits deep shots. The good news is that we have a quarterback who can play a lousy game where he is off target throughout and still score 30 points against a solid defense.
Yeah.
So, we're not going to break down Purdy too much. I think it's going to be exhausting to hear everyone week by week kind of debating, is he the guy, is he not the guy? He's our quarterback. Until he is hurt, he is our quarterback. He's got, around 10 career starts under his belt, as far as regular season. Let's let the season play out a little bit and not overreact. And Shanahan was great in the press conference too about making a note of, he admitted that the Ayuk, that was a miss. That was a shot that they called for him and he missed. But the 2 others that were overthrows, apparently those guys were, 3rd or 4th in the progression, and he wasn't dialing up those shots, and then Brock missed them, but that was just part of the play. So who knows? Maybe that's one that anytime they'd run it in practice, the initial read was open and he hadn't really timed that or practiced that with those guys. So we're not going to overanalyze it to death. He didn't have his best game, but the 49ers scored 30 points. He was efficient. He's still in the top 5 in the league in efficiency.
Yeah, and he has still never lost a game. So if you're keeping score at home, that's a pretty easy thing to track. He's still never lost. So Tom Brady, of course, the GOAT. won about 75% of his games, which is just ridiculous when you think about it. But what that also means is that he lost 25% of his games. So 1 in every 4 games, even Tom Brady is losing. Brock Purdy is going to lose a game. The 49ers are going to lose a game at some point.
Yeah, that streak is going to end, and unless you really think the 49ers are going to become the first perfect team in the NFL since the Dolphins in 72.
So it seems like people just kind of can't make up their minds. It's like they either want to anoint him as this Mr. Irrelevant, look what he's doing, or the other side are these people that are like, oh, what is he doing? He's not a quarterback. He's got no arm. He's not going anywhere in this league. It's all Shanahan. It's like, where are the reasonable takes? Where are the people with eyeballs and common sense? That's what I would like to know.
Yeah. We'll wait and see. I'm certainly glad that he's our quarterback at less than $1 million a year, as opposed to some of these guys like, let's say, I don't know, Deshaun Watson, who just looks horrible, or some of these others. So it'll be interesting to see how he develops this year. As we said, a great win for the 49ers, moving to 2-0 despite the initial road slate, and home to face the Giants on Thursday.
One thing I think we'd be remiss if we didn't mention is the rookie phenom for the Rams, Puka Nacua, in this game.
Sure.
For one thing, it's fun to say, but more importantly, he was the number 1 fantasy pickup after week 1 because he just exploded onto the scene, kind of replacing Cooper Kupp in terms of that PPR magnet. But a lot of times, you'll see somebody sort of a flash in the pan in week 1. You pick them up, you plug them into your starting roster, and then they're inactive, or they get 2 catches for 19 yards, something like that. But Puka Nacua really seems to be the real deal. He had 15 catches in this one for 147 yards. Just kind of looked unstoppable. So if the Rams can ever actually get Cooper Kupp back and have those 2 on the field at the same time, they are going to give defenses some problems.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see. In the meantime, we're gearing up for a game against the Giants, who got some bad news too with Saquon Barkley. They came storming back in a game that they were down, was it 28-7 against the tanking Arizona? Like, how do you get down 3 touchdowns to a team that's tanking?
That was
for
unbelievable. I
was
kind of following along with the score in that one because I knew we were playing the Giants this week. And I thought, okay, well, maybe we're going to beat them 40-0 just like Dallas did.
Sure.
But yeah, with roughly 3.5 minutes to go in the third quarter, the Giants were down 7-28 against the Cardinals, who, as we mentioned, are clearly and non-secretively just tanking on purpose. And the Giants, again, down 7-28. They did come roaring all the way back to beat the Cardinals 31-28. So they are certainly going to be riding a momentum high for sure, but they do have to travel all the way over to the West Coast, and they definitely have been a little banged up as well, in addition to Saquon Barkley.
Yeah, Barkley with that ankle injury, he's been ruled out, and then perhaps even more significant, they're going to be missing their left tackle and their right tackle, Andrew Thomas, one of the better offensive linemen in the league, but also Ben Bredeson out with a concussion. So having the left side of your offensive line out for any game is going to be difficult, but especially you don't want that happening during Niners week. So
yeah, and Danny Dimes, as they call him, they know that the 49ers pressure is going to get there. He mentioned specifically that they have a plan for that's something that they have to game plan for. But as of last year, Daniel Jones did hold on to the ball over 3 seconds per dropback, which was in the bottom 5 in terms of quickest release times. So if he does hold on to the ball, 49ers are going to get home with a Bosa who is continuing to get into game shape. Bosa didn't show up on the stats very much in this game, but he looked a lot more like himself, even though he was getting doubled. His pressure rate and win rate were very high. It was just that Stafford was getting the ball out so quickly. There were really hardly any opportunities for sacks.
And he still drew two penalties, which a 10-yard holding penalty, it's not a death knell for every offense, but for most offenses,
it's going to end most drives.
Yeah, it's a drive killer. So I think he admitted that he's still getting into game shape, and I think he looked better as the game went on, which is encouraging. And I think a really big key for the 49ers is if they can get pressure with 4, especially against these backups of the Giants, unlike this Rams game where they couldn't and they had to blitz. If they can get pressure with 4, it will be nice to be able to use Fred Warner as a bit of a spy because Daniel Jones is running a lot. That's one of the only things they have going for him. And historically, we do not do great against running quarterbacks.
So it'll be very interesting to see how Wilkes deals with running quarterbacks his first time. As you mentioned, that is basically the Achilles heel, if you will. Hopefully nobody actually injures their Achilles for the Giants or the 49ers, but definitely a weakness, if you will, is that running quarterback. So it'll be fun, I think. I don't want to talk out of turn here, but I'm expecting a 49ers victory.
Yeah.
The Giants, even though they did have an amazing comeback against a crappy Cardinals team, they have not looked good. The 49ers have looked good. They've taken care of business, and they are coming home for the first time this year.
Yeah, I think you were right when you talked about, not always things transferring the way you expect them to, but if they're going to give up 28 points to an Arizona team that fast, it's hard to imagine the 49ers don't hang 30, and it's hard to see them without Saquon Barkley putting up 30 on us. So we'll be watching either way, and we'll be interesting to see, too, if Brandon Ayuk suits up for the game, but we're excited. Thursday Night Football leaves your Sunday wide open to watch Red Zone or do those chores your wife has been politely
or watch Red Zone,
or just
yeah.
Watch Red Zone again. But either way, we'll be here to break it down for you. Once again, we are the Niners Bros. Feel free to check us out on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts, and check us out on Twitter as well. We'll see you next week.